Hello, my name is Daniel Anderson, and this is my final presentation for CSE 335 Mobile Application Development. In this presentation, I am going to briefly describe my project idea, the final UML class diagram for the project, the MVC diagram for the project, the limitations that the project has, its capabilities, the lessons and the things that I learned as I worked throughout the development process, as well as a few suggestions that I have that I feel could potentially improve the class and maybe even the final project in future classes to come. So without further ado, let's dive on in. So I really struggled coming up with a good and unique idea for the project, and I finally settled on just creating a friends list that could be used to keep track of your best friends and their personal information. Things like their name and their address, their phone number, email address, and a personal photo. So one can create a new friend entry, which is then added to a table that will display the name and the photo of each friend that's been added to the list. And then these entries in the table can then be deleted by swiping to the left. They can be selected so that you can view them by touching them. And so once you've gone ahead and selected one of those friends in the list, their full information will then be displayed on the screen in a sleek format, from which a user can then either return back to the main list of all of the friends, or they can select the friend to edit it, to edit the information, the name or the address, phone number, email, or photo. Or they can click a button that will allow them to view the friend's address on a map. So although the idea is pretty simple and straightforward, I really wanted to do something that emphasized and focused on the main principles and concepts that we learned in the class throughout this semester, like implementing table views, map kit, core data, segues, and other things that we learned. So we're going to go ahead and move on and take a look at the UML class diagram. So as we take a look at that, you get a glimpse of the many objects and classes, the different variables and methods that they each contain, and how they relate to the other objects and classes in the application. And looking at this, you also get a pretty good flow of how the flow of the application is going to go when it's actually used by a user. So you can see how all the different view controllers and things will be connected and the data that they'll share. The next thing is the MVC diagram, or the model view controller diagram. And it shows a different level of abstraction than the class diagram that I showed previously. So the MVC diagram shows what exactly the model and the view and the controller do and what they consist of, and also how they interact with one another, how data is transferred. Taking a look at this, you can see how the view displays the table showing the list of friends, and it updates the view cells as the more recent data comes in, and is also in charge of like displaying the map on the screen. The controller is what is in charge of transferring data between other controllers. It allows you to add and edit contexts and sends things to core data. It will update the view with new data, and it also is what handles and interprets all of the user interaction of the application. And then the model is what stores the data. It's in charge of any sort of data storage, any calculations or anything that need to be done in that sort. And that's the MVC diagram there. And so the next thing is going to be the limitations of the project. And there are a few in particular on this project. The first limitation that I have listed here is that friends are stored in the order that they are added. And so it's not in alphabetical order, and there's also no search feature. And so especially if you have a big list of friends, it can be very difficult if you're trying to find someone in particular, because there's no way to like search. The other limitation here is going to be that there's no cloud implementation in my application, so all the data is stored locally with no way to back it up or to transfer it if someone gets a new device. And lastly, a user may want to add additional details about their friends, such as like their birthday or likes and dislikes, or other notes of things that they may want to remember about them. And those extra fields don't exist in the implementation of the program as it is now. And so if it wanted to be expanded, that would have to be done later. There are quite a few capabilities that this project has. And first off is the ability to unwind segues, or to pass data backwards from one view controller back to another one. Core data has also been implemented to store data permanently on the device, so that the friends list will be saved even if you close the application and you reopen it. All the data will still be there and loaded in from the core data on the device. There's also the ability to use image selector to pull photos from your photo library to use as the photos to represent your friends. And there's also some error checking that will prevent friends from being added or edited without having a picture selected. The view will also automatically shift upwards if the keyboard appears. So if you click in a text field to make the keyboard pop up, rather than it covering some of the text fields of the application, it'll actually shift the entire view upwards so that everything is still in good view and you can see everything that you need to see. And then going along with that, when you click away from the keyboard, when you click somewhere else on the view, or if you press the enter key on the keyboard will automatically disappear. So it's very smooth transitioning, being able to input data, and having everything that you need to see. MapKit has also been implemented in this project. It allows you to map the friend's address, and also the ability to do things like swiping to delete from the table. I learned a lot from doing this programming assignment, this project, specifically unwinding segues. It was something that I'm not sure if we talked a whole lot about during class, but I spent a lot of time looking into it and researching it, and it helped me a lot to implement the application the way that I envisioned it and the way that I thought it should work. Going along with that, also being able to change the display name of the back buttons and other things when you've moved through a segue to another view controller. If you want to move back to that view controller, it would usually have a default like back. It'd be called back or something, cancel maybe. And so learning how to change the name or what it displays there to move back was something that I learned how to do in this project. And then auto layout and adding constraints to make sure that the application looks good on multiple different devices of different screen sizes and resolutions. Something that I didn't feel like we necessarily did a whole lot on previous assignments and projects, and so I learned a lot about that doing the final project. And it took quite a while to get a hang of knowing how and where to add constraints and what to constrain them to, but I think it turned out pretty well in the final product. and really helped it look well and keep everything in size as you move from device to device. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about was the suggestions and things that I have to say to improve the class in the future, and maybe even to improve the final project in the future. So the first thing, my experience could be drastically different than that of others, but one thing I really struggled to understand was how to implement the MVC architecture in the various projects and labs that we did throughout the semester. I feel like I gained a good understanding of what MVC architecture is and why it's beneficial and why it's important, but I guess I just kind of struggled with knowing if I was correctly implementing it in the projects. There were some projects where I got full points and others that I didn't get full points due to not having correctly implemented the MVC architecture, even though I did both assignments the same way. So I guess I was left a little bit confused on exactly what was right and what was wrong. The next thing is maybe just gaining a better understanding of Xcode, how to debug it, what the different error codes mean. I know I spent many hours on my assignments with little errors popping up and trying to figure out what exactly they meant and how to fix them, when oftentimes they were just very simple things like changing a word or two in the code, or correctly connecting a text field to the code, or setting up the class and connecting it to the actual view controller. The error codes and things in Xcode were confusing to me, and they oftentimes didn't seem very direct on what the solution or what the problem was. And so I don't know if there's a way that can be better taught or described, or if there's some kind of resource out there that could help with that. I feel like that could be something that would be beneficial to students as they're trying to dive in and learn a new programming language and be in this new environment of Xcode and Swift. Which kind of goes along with the third item, which is to write some of the code during class. For me personally, especially since I don't have a Mac that I can use in class, it was difficult for me to follow along with code examples in class that were already written out. It was just a lot of code, a lot of information to try and grasp. And I feel like watching YouTube videos and things on how to implement MapKit, or how to use core data, or how to create a custom cell for a table view were really nice and really beneficial as they wrote the code and talked about what they were writing and why they were writing it the way that they were. It just really helped me to grasp and understand Swift and the code and the concepts so much more. And so if there was a way to do that during class, to either write code or to show a video of somebody writing code and walking through it and talking about it as you write it, I feel like could be really beneficial, especially at the early stages of the class, but even into the later stages as code becomes a little bit more complex and more things are added. It can be difficult to follow along at times. So that's that suggestion. And then lastly, just a really brief suggestion about the final project. I would just say maybe a few more defined guidelines on what is and what is not an acceptable project idea, what's too simple, what's too complex. I feel like I did a pretty basic, pretty simple project, and I just want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing, that I'm implementing what I need to, because I feel like following the guidelines, I've done table view and I did MapKit and core data and things, and I feel like I've hit the required things that I need. And so I don't know, maybe more, I'm not the most creative person, so maybe more ideas of sample projects or things, not necessarily in-depth ideas, but just some sort of help in that. So those are my suggestions, and that's the end of my presentation. I want to thank you for the semester that we had and for all the things that I learned, and I hope you have a great break. Thank you.